So you mentioned that he had broken your heart worse than your ex-husband could have. Like, why do you feel that I guess that heartbreak was so much more painful or more intense, or that that possibility was greater with him than with someone that you were married to?
Yeah, it's really interesting because a lot of my readers will message me and be like, "Why is it the guy after? Like,
Mhm.
why is like that the one that fucks you up so bad?" And I'm like, "Girl, I know." I think for me specifically, so like I said, I had lost my dad and my high school sweetheart throughout my life. So I had developed this kind of like fear of abandonment and when I love someone they leave, which manifested in me never wanting to be alone and always wanting to like have a man in my life or always living with a roommate. And through my healing journey, once I, got to Europe and started really like digging in deep, I realized that I had loved my dad and he died. I had loved my high school sweetheart and he died. So I married my ex husband because I wasn't fully in love with him and that felt safe.
Mm,
Subconsciously, obviously, I
right.
wasn't walking down the aisle being like, we're good. It's all fine. I don't really love him. Like, of course, I loved him as a human, but I wasn't in love with him. And I
Mhm.
think that was part of my saving grace when the divorce happened because I wasn't dealing with this like epic heartbreak. I was dealing with betrayal and rage for someone who had been my best friend for 5 years and had promised to keep my body safe and spoken these vows to me that now was so clearly done. But no, the heartbreak, unfortunately, was what came after. But I was thankful that those were two separate ordeals. Like the fallout from the divorce that I felt was very separate from the heartbreak that I ended up feeling before the Europe trip.
So how do you keep your heart open? So you go through heartbreak and you go through devastating loss, like real trauma. I think it's so important to distinguish between trauma and just a hardship. They are different. And the human ecosystem is so resilient. We are made, even through trauma, we are made to really be able to process and move forward. Otherwise, we wouldn't have evolved to where we are. So I think we're in this place that gets really dicey when like every infringement is a trauma. And I think that that dishonors the actual trauma. Like you have gone through real trauma. Trauma is it's outside of the ordinary, right? Like you're not supposed to die young. You're not supposed to lose your lover, your first love young. You're not supposed to, as a child, like be the first one to discover your father. Like those are abnormal. That is real trauma. And I
Yeah.
honor you for sharing that and going through that.
Thank
And I
you.
think that a lot of times we'll see something like a divorce and we're like, well, that's trauma. Well, that's unfortunately, it's a hardship. It's a heartbreak. I'm not saying it's easy, but I personally wouldn't classify it as that. So I think like that distinguishing definition, I think is really important.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely different levels of kinds of trauma, but you're right. I think in today's world, we're so quick to be like, oh, this is my trauma. These are my triggers. And it almost like takes the importance of, like you said, the real trauma is kind of away from those. And I think it's really important to own those traumas, but not, like we were saying earlier, be a victim to them. Like I remember very clearly getting into a fight with my mom when I was like in my angsty teen years. And we were in the throes of yelling at each other. And I was like, well, I'm like this because dad died. And she stopped everything and looked at me and was like, Gabrielle, you can be sad, you can be angry, you can feel whatever you want to feel, but you will never use your father's death as an excuse as to why you're behaving a certain way ever. And I think that's so often when people don't resolve the trauma that they go through, they end up inflicting it on other people. And then those people end up in therapy for the trauma that they didn't fucking solve in the first place.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's very, very important. But I get the question, how did you keep your heart open, a lot,
Mhm.
because I get that when you go through stuff, especially like a divorce or a heartbreak, your initial thing is to be like, all right, we're closing up shop. I'm
Mhm.
putting a wall up, fuck off. Everybody can just like leave me alone. We're done. And that would have been really easy for me to do after finding out about my ex husband's affair and like all the things that were so interwoven with that situation. But if I would have done that, I would have never met the man after, who in the book's name is Javier. I would never have fallen in love like that. I would never have had my heart broken, which I can assure you was the first big heartbreak of my life, in that sense. And I wouldn't have gone on this trip. It wouldn't have completely changed me as a human and like healed me in so many different ways I didn't know possible. And I wouldn't have written this book about it that's completely changed my entire career and my life and given me such a gift to help other people who have gone through the heartbreaks and the traumas all over the world.